please welcome Head of Payments and Commerce for Facebook, Deborah Liu, and Andreessen Horowitz General Partner, Alex Rampell.
Like a swinging vine, swing my heart across the line, and my face is flashing signs.
It's great to be here. Thank
Yes.
you, Deb, for coming. I'm going to embarrass Deb publicly on stage here to start. She didn't even know I was going to do this. So I had the privilege of working with, I was the co-founder and CEO of a company called TrialPay, which was acquired by Visa a little while ago. And Facebook was one of our partners at TrialPay. And Deb and I would exchange emails pretty much every night, but always after 1 a.m. or 2 a.m.
Yes, that's probably about right.
So she is the hardest working person, I think, in this, probably, I mean, I don't want to say this entire room, but I think you probably are.
Definitely not in this entire room.
Incredible partner, and thank you again.
But you emailed me at 1 because you knew that's actually when I was going to respond to you in 2 minutes.
Exactly. So to start, I just thought it'd be helpful for you to quantify the opportunity. So Facebook often talks a lot about how many people are daily active users of Facebook or monthly active users, and it's now over 1 billion. It's incredible. But if you think about commerce, commerce takes 3 different inputs. You need consumers, you need merchants, and then you need money. So maybe you can kind of break down how Facebook thinks about those 3 and a little bit more on the merchant side too.
Sure. Well, obviously, with an audience of over 1 billion people every day, that's where the consumers are. But as you think about sort of where retailers are, where merchants are, there's 45 million pages on Facebook, so they're already there. And a lot of these merchants are also users of Facebook as well. And somewhere in between is actually the transaction, so matching those things. And Facebook is just a natural place for people where pages are there, people are actually fans of those pages, they actually interact with those pages, they interact with each other as well. And so in the middle of that is where transactions are happening. And so that's how we think about it at Facebook, which is actually a way to connect people with the things that they love, the businesses that they love, and the transactions that they want to make.
And that's across all the different apps that you have as platforms.
Yeah.
It's Instagram, it's WhatsApp, it's Messenger, it's Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So to start, can you give us an overview of what Facebook has been doing on the commerce front to date?
What's interesting about what's happening on Facebook is a lot of it actually happened very naturally on the platform. So as opposed to us actually saying, we want to be in this business, we want to build something, it's actually people leveraging what's happening already. So an example is Facebook groups. So it was just a product that we built many years ago, and people were connecting with each other and building communities and connecting to actually just talk about the things they love. And what we noticed was that beyond just connecting and talking about parenting or talking about an enthusiast hobby thing that they loved, they were actually starting to transact with each other. And so there's a parenting group I'm a part of, and what they do is eventually you realize you outgrow a lot of things. And so it was just an opportunity for people to say, hey, anyone looking for, say, a new baby swing or some clothes of this size? And you just see like transactions just starting to happen. And eventually some of these groups created new groups that said, hey, there's so much commerce activity happening, we're going to create new groups where we can have conversation in one place and actually have the transactions happen in another. And we saw this happening at scale across many different verticals. And so it's just a way where the platform was built really to create community and connection, and where commerce emerged completely organically. The same thing happened with Pages, where it's one of our oldest products. It was a way for brands and community pages to actually be created so people can connect around interest. But what happened over time was Pages said, look, here's an audience of people who are interested in my products, so why don't I post specials to my local business? Recently, we launched something where you can actually set a call to action, and you can do things like message the business, or visit a website, or maybe call the business. And again, it's just a very simple tool where we just said, we noticed that businesses would like to connect with people, and how can we provide a very simple set of tools to make that happen? Beyond that, we saw in some countries, like people were just using their profiles. Actually, there's a woman named Regina in Brazil we met, and she said, my daughter lost her job, and what we wanted to do was actually just, I make homemade pies, and maybe I could just create a business around this to make some money. And that's what she did. She actually created a business and just posted on her daughter's Facebook profile and created a business just on that, and she delivers the pies locally. And again, these are just examples of really simple things that people are doing where commerce is happening because people are connecting with each other. And it's not that we're creating a commerce business from scratch, it's really people wanting to see that kind of connection between a buyer and a seller, a merchant and a person. And then there's an example of my friend his name's Kit. And he posted about a car he bought. And so he was super excited about this car. It's a Fiat 500e. And he posted it on Facebook, and a lot of our friends were like, that's a great deal that you got on this lease. And he talked about where he got it, how he got it. And over time, he created a Facebook group around this as well. And I think we estimated he sold about 200 of these cars in the Bay Area. And so he makes no money doing this. He's just a car enthusiast. But he actually has created just an enthusiast group now, and they talk about where to charge and accessories, and it's just become a thing where he's just super passionate. And again, in that, there wasn't a specific merchant, there wasn't a specific consumer. It was just a group of people who really cared about something that got together and created commerce magically on the site. And in that is just the opportunity that you see in commerce on a platform like Facebook and in all the social activity that's happening, is that on Instagram, people are posting about things that they bought or clothing that they love. This is just happening at scale already. And so then the question is, how do we actually make that happen so that businesses can get involved, so that transactions can actually happen? And that's where the next step is.
And I imagine that's how you think about payments as well, because if people could pay very, very easily, and without friction, more commerce would happen from these experiences, because right now to buy that car takes a lot of effort. And if you could put your thumb down on your iPhone or on your Google phone or your Android phone, it makes it a lot easier and more transactions would happen, and that helps you.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges on the platform, is that right now commerce is happening, but there isn't sort of the last mile, right? You go to a website, maybe you enter, there's a lot of friction. And so maybe you go to someone's M site and you set up an account. You put in your email address and password, and maybe you put in your credit card information, shipping, and there's just a lot of friction in that. And so just us as an industry, if we can find a way to close that loop and make it easier, so when the distance between seeing something and then wanting to make that purchase is that much more simple, then we can actually close the loop and make those transactions happen.
So how about mobile commerce? So Facebook started off not as a mobile website because there were no mobile websites in 2004. What do you think is the most exciting part about mobile commerce today, especially from Facebook's vantage point and how Facebook wants to play in it?
Well, the thing about every disruptive technology is it also disrupts all the industries around it. So you think about how retail was like 50 years ago, right? You go to a general store, maybe a hardware store, and it's something local. And then eventually stores gathered together and had malls, and then there were big box shops, and you can just see the evolution. And then there was a shift online. And each time there's a disruption in technology, it disrupts all industries as well, so commerce is no exception. But now with the move to mobile, that's happening yet again. Basically with desktop commerce, things start with search boxes, right? You go to maybe your favorite retailer, maybe you go to a search engine, and you actually type in what you're looking for. On mobile, that's very, very different. Like, even though time spent on mobile and desktop is almost exactly the same, there's 3 times as many searches on desktop as there is on mobile, which means that people aren't actually searching for things like they used to. They're actually doing something completely different. And so we actually spent some time trying to understand what they're doing, and a lot of it is just discovery. It's actually being in Instagram and seeing what your friends are sharing and what people are talking about. What are the trends? It's actually seeing an ad for something that you didn't know you wanted. It's actually like looking at your Facebook newsfeed and just seeing like stories of your friends and then articles and then things that you want to buy. And those connections through groups, through pages are just happening. And they're happening in mobile in such an interesting way, in that people don't come in with like intent where you go to a box and you say, I want to buy this. I want to look for a digital camera. Instead, you're actually seeing what's happening around you, and you're able to actually find the things that you want to buy. And that's where transactions are starting. And right now, let's say on mobile, it's really hard to buy. So maybe you go to desktop, maybe you ask your friends. There's a lot of activity that happens. But discovery is actually happening the moment you see something. And that's where mobile commerce is really changing the game. Which is now it's not about sort of this thing where you want, and now it's just picking a place to buy it. It's really about a conversation. It's really about discovery. It's really about connections. And that's the fundamental change that's happening.
So I was in the elevator, and there were 8 of us in the elevator. Somebody pushes the button to go down to the lobby, and then everybody goes like this and looks at their phone. Then the elevator door opens, then some people were still looking at their phone, and they didn't get out. But people, when you think about mobile commerce, you have these bite-sized chunks. I mean, just mobile in general, it's a different experience, where when I went to HomeDepot.com on my computer, I had intent to buy. Maybe I'm going to HomeDepot.com on my phone because I'm in Ace Hardware, and I want to quickly shop, or not shop, but really price compare. So how do you think about this snacking and how that impacts mobile commerce commerce, and just like other things that people should keep in mind as they think about mobile usage?
What's fascinating is, people tell, in the US, people spend 3 hours on their phone. They're literally in the elevator shopping and looking at things. But the experience is totally different. It's not a session-based, like I'm sitting here, I know I want to do something, and I'm going through the steps to actually complete a process. It's really different, which is like you happen to be browsing something, you see something you like, you're discovering something, your friend sends you something. And those who are able to capture that moment and actually drive a transaction, that's who's going to be able to win in this industry. I think the biggest challenge for us as an industry in payments is that those moments are very ephemeral. They're happening really quickly. So the question is, how do you actually make the transaction happen as quickly as possible so you don't lose track? Maybe you see something you like in, say, Newsfeed or Instagram, and you want to buy that. Your session is done now. That 4 minutes is done. You didn't get a chance to do that, and you might or not be able to navigate back there again. And so how do we create a system where the transaction can happen quickly, where there's less friction? All of us have looked at the mobile friction problem, right? Like, basically conversion is a third to a half of what it is when you have a credential on file and you don't. And it's a half, when it's on mobile versus desktop. So you think about just the challenge of that. If you don't have a credential on file and you don't have your information on file on mobile, that moment has passed, and someone's not going to fill those 20 fields to kind of complete the transaction. So we really need to think about, as an industry, how to streamline that process together, or we lose that opportunity to make that transaction happen.
So you have a unique background in that you came from PayPal and you were there for a long time, and then you went to Facebook, and now you run everything that you run today. What lessons do you think, given that everybody here, or a big chunk of people here, are payment professionals, what lessons do you think people can learn from your time at Facebook, or what advice would you give to them?
Payments is such an enabler of transactions, but people see it as a commodity in a lot of ways. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for an industry like this, which is people see payments as something which just needs to happen at the very end. But actually, it can be something that's value add in the world as well, that if we can actually solve this mobile conversion problem, that if we can stitch discovery and conversion together into transactions, that's magical. The thing about Facebook that's fascinating, and what I've learned over the last few years, is that when you bring people together, they actually want to do commerce. They actually want to connect. That's just another way to connect, just like sharing photos, just like sharing videos, just like talking to each other, that they want to transact. And so that's the magic, which is finding ways to actually help them transact. So an example is, I was checking out the site that someone sent me. It's a Facebook group, and they buy and sell marbles. And these are kids, you think kids' marbles, right? You get a bag, it's like $1, and it's like 10 of them. Actually, these are works of art. I've never seen marbles like this, but they actually sell for several $100s on Facebook in these groups. And they actually do it in an auction style. So in the comments, you actually bid for these marbles. And what's really fascinating about it was that this was just a group of enthusiasts that got together and said, let's just talk about something we love. And now let's actually find a way to connect, to actually trade these things. But the thing that is the commonality amongst all of that is trust. Because are you willing to send somebody several $100s and receive a marble through the mail that is what people described it as? That's such a fascinating thing, which is, if you can actually safely enable that transaction, where you can know that person, have authentic identity, have community tied to it, but then also make the payment transaction really safe, then you can enable all of those types of enthusiast groups and hobbyist groups to create this kind of activity on their own. And so these are the kinds of things that I've learned at Facebook, which is when you connect people and you make it easy to transact, those two pieces have to come together, which is something that people want to connect and buy, and then actually making the transaction possible. When those two things come together, that's actually what makes magic happen.
Yep. So the Commerce Department used to break out e-commerce in two groups. There was travel, and then there was everything else. And everything else was basically stuff that got shipped to you in a box. And then Groupon came out, and a bunch of other companies like Groupon, and they really took that example of going to an airplane. Like, you print out a little boarding pass, you show it to a guy at the airport, and they let you on the plane. Yeah. And that's what Groupon did for a Chinese restaurant. That's what Groupon did for a massage. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious how you think about offline commerce. If you look at China right now, if you talk to any company, Tencent, Baidu, and ask them, what is your #1 priority as a company, they say O2O. It's online to offline commerce. How does Facebook think about that? And how is that different than a lot of the online things? Because if I'm buying marbles, that's almost something that's been done non-socially, but on eBay in the past, whereas offline's a little bit different.
Yeah. Offline is one of the biggest challenges, which is, still, we talk about e-commerce, and it's a huge industry, but a vast, vast majority of commerce is absolutely local. Right? And that's where the last mile matters a lot. Where if you can discover something and then go to a store and pick it up, where you can actually touch the thing. A lot of things just are not easy to buy online. It's very, very difficult to do that. And so the way we think about it is we recently started testing something we call Place Tips. We launched this product where you can actually place a beacon in your local store. And so when people come to your store, you can actually see maybe specials that you have, or you can see friends that have checked in there. You can see reviews. And it's just a way for us to bring kind of the social activity from what's happening on a social network to the store and then back onto the social activity as well. Right. And so it's self-reinforcing. If we can solve that problem to bring people to the place that they want to go, people don't go to malls like they used to, right? People don't go to the same main streets they used to. Now there are places they want to go to connect with that store, that local artisan bakery and those types of things. If we can actually enable that and actually bring people together through just discovering that place through a page, for example, or maybe your friend talking about it, and then actually close that transaction and help them, see what the specials are, see what's happening day to day, what the new products are. That would be incredible because, we think about e-commerce all day, and a lot of us in this room spend a lot of time on e-commerce, but actually most of the transactions in the world are happening offline. Right. And connecting that is incredibly important.
Yeah, so I often think about intent generation and intent harvesting.
Yeah.
And Google has done a phenomenal job on both,
yeah.
but they are often the last click.
Yes.
And the advertising paradigm that's been used for 10 plus years is last click wins. Yeah. So I might have heard about this particular item, like a camera or a marble. I read about it here, here, and here, but then when it's time to buy, I go to Google, and then Google gets that last click, they get all of the ad revenue. When you think about offline, I've always had this thought that payment data is actually a lot more valuable than payment fees. The problem is, and why would Google want to get into payments? Well, if they know that you paid somewhere, they can enable more advertising. How do you think about that? Because one of the problems with, or one of the reasons why you often don't have a flywheel is if I don't know that my particular customer came from this particular ad, then I don't buy more of those ads. But if I do, this is like your partnership with Datalogics, then I'll spend more money on ads. And payment data seems like it's not a panacea, but it's a great way of informing that. So how do you think about using that?
I think that the thing that's, when you used to have a desktop world, search led directly to the transaction. And now it's really the ambient kind of activity that's happening. It might be a conversation, so in a chat. It might be something you see in a photo. It might be a page post. All of those things contribute, and the last click is just one of the parts of the journey at this point. And it's really hard to measure. But actually the thing that everyone agrees on is the transaction happened when the payment happens.
Right.
That's the only thing everyone in this industry can agree on, is actually the transaction and the transfer of money for goods happened someplace. And somewhere in this room, somebody powered that. And I think that that's because it's a commonality, and because it's a common ground that everyone can agree on, then you can work your way backwards, which is, how did that transaction happen in that store? How did you discover that store? How does that journey happen? And that's why I think cross-device attribution, cross-device, understanding what that consumer's journey was, whether it was seeing something in newsfeed, seeing a photo of a friend, all of those things coming together to that transaction. But that's an incredibly hard problem, because the
Right.
only thing we can agree on is the last thing that happens. And then how do we actually unpack the magic that made the rest of it happen?
Right.
But because we can agree on that, the transaction happening, then we can actually go back and ask people. We can actually look at what's happening and say, well, where did you discover this? What has been part of your journey? And so it will take us some time, because it is that point of commonality, though, the people in this room have such an opportunity to take a step back and say, how do we actually bring people and replicate that journey for the next person, the next person, the next person? And it's not as simple as, someone has something to buy, and now they search for it, and then they complete the transaction.
Right. But do you want to be the last click? Because that's the other way of doing it. It might be very, very hard to change this prevailing paradigm that the last click wins, and that's how I'm going to attribute my ad success. So if you are the last click, then you win every time, which is great, as opposed to exactly as what you were saying. It's a very, very challenging problem to try to show all of this intent generation that happened that led to that last click that happened somewhere else or offline.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I've been trying to buy a digital camera, and I had a friend who posted a photo of something he had taken a photo of, and I asked him about his camera, and he said, oh, actually, here's a few links. So through messaging, he shared with me all of the research that he did to buy his camera. And I looked at it, and then I went on Facebook, and I actually searched to see if any of my other friends had the same camera. And actually, somebody who sits directly behind me owned the same camera, and he was telling me about his. And eventually, I went to a Google search box, and I searched for that product.
Right.
But all of that journey happens totally invisible to everyone, and then that last transaction, the last click, is what happens.
Right.
But that part of the journey is important for us as an industry because we want that transaction to happen. Attribution is something is really important for us to solve, but it's unrealistic to say that I'm going to be on Facebook in that 4 minutes and click on that specific ad to buy a $600 camera at that moment.
Yeah.
But then the question is, how do we find out how I made that journey? What are the things I searched for on Facebook? I actually searched, found a friend, he had posted that camera in a group because he was thinking about selling it, and that's actually how I found out more information, and that solidified my decision to actually do the search to do this. And so I think over time, that kind of journey of discovery is something we need to unpack and figure out ways to unpack together. And to do it in such a way that, I can find that camera easily at the place that I want to buy it. But, the last click has just been a paradigm for a long time, and I think it will be for a long time as well. And so that's why a lot of what Facebook has been working on is, how do we actually have a deeper discovery journey instead? Let's focus on, things like, we recently launched carousel ads where you can actually look at multiple items. So you're actually volunteering to actually more deeply look at an experience. We also are we actually started testing this canvas for e-commerce where you can actually more immersively look at a product. So instead of just seeing a small photo or maybe a few photos, you can actually look at how a watch is made and really go deeply into understanding how a watch is made so that you can decide whether that thing is for you. And so now rather than saying, okay, we must be the last click every time, let's actually drive the journey and make the journey better. Because if you can drive better discovery overall, that transaction will happen eventually. And so the question is, what is the best way to do that? And so yes, if you want to, at the end of looking at how that watch is made, you want to click and buy that watch, that's great. If not, if you search for it later, that you were able to see that ad on Facebook and actually engage in it as well. And so then the advertiser would actually have to figure out, well, how much is attributed to the last search and how much is attributed to the fact that I actually saw all of these customers on this journey on their way to discover more about my product.
Great. Well, I think we're out of time, but
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Alex.